The sky of Proxima Centauri b always carried a reddish hue, as if perpetually stuck in the moments before sunset. David Orton had grown accustomed to it over the 7 years he'd lived on this remote human colony. The distant red dwarf star provided just enough light and warmth to make human habitation possible, if not entirely comfortable. David wiped the sweat from his brow as he tightened the final bolt on Mrs. Peterson's atmospheric regulator. The small device hummed back to life, its soft blue glow indicating proper functioning. There you go, Mrs. Peterson. Should keep your greenhouse at optimal conditions for at least another year. The elderly woman smiled, her weathered face a testament to the harsh conditions of colony life. Thank you. David, I don't know what we'd all do without you out here. Not many engineers willing to work for vegetables and homemade jam. David smiled back, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. There was a time when he'd commanded a team of 50 engineers at the colony's main space station. Now, he fixed broken machinery for whatever his neighbors could spare. Emily loves your raspberry preserves. Speaking of which, I should head back. School's out soon. As David packed his tools, Mrs. Peterson placed a jar of deep purple jam and a bag of fresh vegetables into his hands. Give that child a hug from me. Such a brave little girl. David nodded, his throat suddenly tight. Emily was brave, braver than any 8-year-old should have to be. Brave since the accident that took her mother 3 years ago. The walk back to his small prefabricated home took 15 minutes along the colony's dusty main road. Proxima Colony had been established as a mining outpost originally, meant to extract rare minerals from the planet's unusual geological formations. Over time, it had grown into a settlement of nearly 5,000 souls, mostly miners, farmers, and the occasional merchant. The real action happened up at the orbital station, where the big transport ships docked, or at least it used to. The station had fallen into disrepair after the company pulled most of its funding. David had resigned his position as chief engineer shortly after Sarah's death, unable to face the daily reminder of where she'd died. Crushed when a docking clamp malfunctioned during routine maintenance. The accident that shouldn't have happened. David's home sat on the outskirts of the colony, a modest structure, but with a large workshop attached. He'd built the workshop himself, converting it from an old storage unit. It was there he repaired everything from atmospheric regulators to hover bikes to the occasional small spacecraft. People knew to come to him when official repair costs were too high, which on this colony was most of the time. As he approached his house, he noticed Emily already sitting on the front step, her school tablet in her lap, dark hair falling over her face as she concentrated. "Hey, Spacer," he called, using his nickname for her. "How was school?" Emily looked up, her serious expression breaking into a smile that reminded him so much of Sarah, it hurt. "Dad, we learned about the early Mars colonies today. Did you know they used to grow potatoes in their own poop?" David laughed, the sound feeling foreign but good. "Yes, I did know that. Very resourceful of them." "Gross but cool," Emily declared, falling into step beside him as they entered the house. "What's for dinner?" "Mrs. Peterson paid me in vegetables. How about stew?" "Again?" Emily made a face but didn't complain further. She understood their situation better than a child should have to. David was starting dinner when a notification chimed from his workshop terminal. Someone requesting repair services. He considered ignoring it. He'd already worked a full day. But they needed the credits, or trade goods, or whatever was being offered. "I need to check this. Start your homework, okay?" The message was brief and unusually formal. Repair services required for propulsion system. Payment: 500 credits. Urgent. 500 credits was more than David typically made in a month of repair jobs. It was suspicious, but he couldn't afford to turn it down without at least investigating. He sent a reply with his workshop coordinates and continued making dinner, telling himself it was probably just some wealthy merchant passing through who didn't know the local rates. 2 hours later, as Emily was getting ready for bed, David heard the distinctive hum of a spacecraft landing nearby. He stepped outside, expecting to see one of the common colony transport shuttles. What greeted him instead made his breath catch. The craft was like nothing he'd ever seen before. It was sleek and silver, with no visible propulsion system or external markings. It seemed to hover silently above the ground, defying the laws of physics as David understood them. More surprising was the figure that emerged from it. The being stood nearly 7 feet tall, with iridescent skin that shifted between deep blue and purple, depending on how the light hit it. Its body was humanoid, but impossibly thin, with elongated limbs and digits. The head was ovoid, with large, almond-shaped eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. An alien, a real, living alien. Humanity had encountered evidence of other intelligent species in their expansion through nearby star systems, ruins, artifacts, abandoned stations, but never a living representative. First contact protocols were something taught in schools, but never actually implemented. And now one was standing in front of David's workshop. The alien spoke, its voice a melodic series of clicks and whistles that somehow resolved into accented but understandable English. "You are the repair technician?" David swallowed hard, fighting the urge to run back inside and lock the door. Yes, I'm David Orton. You need repairs?" The alien inclined its head in what might have been a nod. "My craft's propulsion matrix has sustained damage. I detected your colony and noted your repair capabilities." It gestured toward the silver ship. "I can compensate you adequately." David's mind raced. This was far beyond his experience. He should report this to the colony administration immediately. But something held him back. Curiosity, perhaps. Or the memory of the 500 credits offered when his pantry was nearly empty. "I'll take a look," he heard himself say. "But I can't promise anything. Your technology is unfamiliar to me." The alien made a sound that might have been amusement. "Your understanding of spatial mechanics will suffice. The principles are universal." David turned to go back inside, to tell Emily he'd be in the workshop, when he noticed her standing in the doorway, eyes wide with wonder and fear. "Dad," she whispered, "is that—" "Go back inside. Everything's fine. I just have a customer." To his relief, she nodded and retreated inside, though he knew she'd be watching through the window. The alien followed David to the workshop, ducking to enter the human-sized doorway. Inside, David activated the overhead lights, revealing his organized but modest repair setup. "I'll need to examine your ship," David said, grabbing his diagnostic tools. The alien made a gesture with its long fingers, and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. "This is the propulsion matrix schematic. The damaged section is highlighted." David stared at the display, initially overwhelmed by the complexity. But as he studied it, he began to recognize certain patterns: energy flows, containment fields, matter-antimatter reactions. The principles were indeed familiar, even if the implementation was centuries beyond human technology. "This is incredible," he murmured. "Your ship uses direct spatial manipulation for propulsion." "Correct. The damage occurred when passing through an unusually dense radiation field. The matrix recalibration failed." David spent the next hour studying the schematics, while the alien brought components from the ship for him to examine. Despite the advanced technology, the actual repair turned out to be relatively straightforward, a misalignment in the field generators that required precision adjustments. As David worked, he found himself asking questions about the technology, the alien species, and their presence in this star system. The alien, who never offered a name or asked for David's, answered some questions, but deflected others. "Your species is not listed in the galactic registry," the alien said at one point. "Yet you have achieved interstellar travel." "Barely," David replied, making a delicate adjustment to a crystal-like component. "We've colonized a handful of systems, but we're still figuring it out. No faster-than-light travel yet, if that's what you're wondering." The alien made that sound again, something like amusement. Yet, by midnight, the repair was complete. David had never felt so intellectually stimulated in his life. The alien technology was elegant in its complexity, and he'd learned more in a few hours than in years of engineering school. The alien tested the component, seeming satisfied. "The repair is adequate. Your compensation." A small metallic disc appeared in the alien's palm, which it extended to David. 500 credits as agreed," the alien said. David accepted the disc hesitantly. "This isn't colony currency. It contains refined platinum equivalent to your requested payment. It will be acceptable at any trading post." David nodded, pocketing the disc. "Thank you." The alien studied him for a moment, its large eyes unreadable. "You have an aptitude for this work that exceeds your technological level. It is unusual." Before David could respond, the alien continued. "I am authorized to offer you an opportunity. My collective requires skilled technicians for an important journey. Your abilities would be valued." David blinked in surprise. "You're offering me a job? To leave with you?" "A temporary arrangement. One standard solar orbit. Your knowledge of human systems would be useful for our mission." "What mission? Where would we go?" The alien's skin shifted to a deeper blue. "I am not authorized to disclose details without your agreement. The journey would be safe. Your offspring could accompany you." David felt a chill at the mention of Emily. "How do you know about my daughter?" "Bioscanning is standard protocol when encountering new species. Your dwelling contains 2 human life signs. 1 juvenile." David's protective instincts flared. "I appreciate the offer, but my life is here. My daughter needs stability." The alien was silent for a moment, then inclined its head. "As you wish. The offer remains open for 1 planetary rotation. Should you reconsider, you may signal using this." It handed David a small device, no larger than a coin, with a single smooth surface. "Press and hold to transmit. We will receive." With that, the alien returned to its ship. David watched in amazement as the vessel rose silently into the night sky, accelerating at an impossible rate until it was just another star among many. He stood there for several minutes, the small signaling device cool in his palm, wondering if he'd made the right choice. The thought of seeing technology like that up close again was tempting, but Emily had already lost 1 parent. He wouldn't risk leaving her alone. Inside the house, he found Emily asleep on the couch, clearly having tried to wait up for him. He carried her to her bed, tucking her in gently. "Dad?" she murmured sleepily. "Was that really an alien?" "Yes, Spacer, it really was." "Cool," she whispered, already drifting back to sleep. David smiled, kissing her forehead. "Very cool. Sleep tight." He checked the house security system, a habit from his days as chief engineer, and finally went to bed himself. The day's events swirling in his mind, despite his exhaustion. Sleep eluded him. The alien technology he'd glimpsed represented possibilities he'd never imagined. What else was out there among the stars? What would it be like to see it firsthand? But each time these thoughts surfaced, he reminded himself of his responsibilities here, of Emily, of the life they'd rebuilt after Sarah's death. He finally drifted off to sleep in the early hours of the morning, the alien signaling device placed carefully in his bedside drawer. The sound of spacecraft engines woke him at dawn. These weren't the quiet, almost musical hum of the alien vessel, but the harsh, powerful thrusters of military-grade ships. David jumped from bed and rushed to the window. 3 black cruisers hovered around his house, each bearing the insignia of the Interplanetary Defense Force, the military arm of Earth's government that oversaw all colonial operations. "Dad?" Emily appeared in his doorway, fear evident in her voice. "Why are there ships outside?" David pulled her close. "I don't know. Spacer. But it's going to be okay." Even as he said it, he heard the sound of his front door being forced open, followed by heavy boots on the floor. "David Orton," a voice called out. "This is Commander Serena Diaz of the IDF. We need to speak with you immediately." David's mind raced. How did they know about the alien? Had they been monitoring his workshop? He turned to Emily, keeping his voice calm. "I need you to go to your room and stay there until I come get you. Can you do that for me?" She nodded, eyes wide but trusting. "Are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. Just some official business. Go on now." Once Emily was safely in her room, David walked into the living area to find 4 armed soldiers and a woman in an IDF commander's uniform. She was tall and imposing, with short black hair and sharp features that suggested a no-nonsense attitude. "Mr. Orton," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "I'm Commander Serena Diaz. We need to discuss the visitor you had last night." David crossed his arms. "I wasn't aware it was illegal to accept repair jobs." Commander Diaz's expression remained neutral. "It is when the client is an unregistered extraterrestrial entity using restricted technology. We need you to come with us. And if I refuse, I have a daughter to look after." "Arrangements have been made for your daughter. This is not a request. Mr. Orton, it's a matter of planetary security." David felt a surge of anger. "You're not taking me anywhere without my daughter, and you're certainly not making arrangements for her without my consent." Commander Diaz sighed, her rigid posture softening slightly. "Mr. Orton, I understand your concern, truly, but the situation is more complex than you realize. The being you encountered last night is part of a species known as the Ardani. We've been tracking their movements for months. If you knew about them, why didn't you make contact? Why let them approach a civilian?" "We didn't know they would approach you specifically. We were monitoring their ship in orbit when it suddenly descended to the surface." She paused. "What exactly did they ask you to repair?" David hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "A propulsion system component. Nothing weaponized, if that's what you're worried about." "And did they offer you anything else? Perhaps an invitation?" David's surprise must have shown on his face, because Commander Diaz nodded as if confirming a suspicion. "They did, didn't they? They asked you to join them." "How could you possibly know that?" "Because they've done it before. Mr. Orton. On 3 other colonies. They find humans with technical aptitude and recruit them. What we don't know is why." David considered his options. These people had burst into his home, frightened his daughter, and now expected his cooperation. But if what the commander said was true, there might be more to the alien's visit than he realized. "I'll talk to you," he finally said. "But my daughter comes with us. I'm not leaving her with strangers." Commander Diaz considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Acceptable. Pack what you need for a few days. We'll depart in 30 minutes." As the commander and her soldiers stepped outside to give them privacy, David quickly helped Emily pack a small bag, trying to frame the situation as an adventure rather than a crisis. "We're going on a trip with these space soldiers," he explained, keeping his voice light. "They need my help with something important." Emily, perceptive as always, didn't seem entirely convinced. "Because of the alien last night?" "Yes, Spacer. They want to know about the alien's ship." "Are we in danger?" David paused, looking into his daughter's eyes. He'd never lied to her, not about anything important. "I don't think so, but I promise I'll keep you safe, no matter what, okay?" She nodded solemnly. "Okay." 30 minutes later, they boarded the largest of the 3 cruisers. David had expected to be treated like a prisoner, but instead, they were shown to comfortable quarters with 2 beds, a small sitting area, and even a few children's books and games for Emily. "We'll be traveling to the orbital station," Commander Diaz informed them. "My superior wants to debrief you personally." The station? David felt a knot form in his stomach. He hadn't been back there since Sarah's death. The commander must have noted his discomfort. "Is there a problem, Mr. Orton?" "No," he said quickly. "No problem." The journey to the station took less than an hour. Emily spent the time exploring their quarters and asking endless questions about the ship. Which one of the younger soldiers was kind enough to answer? David sat in silence, his thoughts alternating between concern for their situation and dread at returning to the place where he'd lost Sarah. Proxima Station hung in orbit like a giant metal wheel, rotating to create artificial gravity in its outer ring. As their ship approached, David could see that it had changed since his time there. New modules had been added, and the company logos had been replaced with IDF insignia. The station had been militarized. They docked at one of the upper bays, and Commander Diaz escorted them through the station's corridors. David kept his eyes forward, trying not to remember the last time he'd walked these halls, carrying Sarah's personal effects after the accident. They were led to a conference room, where a man in an admiral's uniform waited. He was older, with silver hair and a weathered face that suggested years of difficult decisions. "Mr. Orton, I'm Admiral Kazan. Thank you for joining us. And who is this young lady?" "My daughter, Emily," David said, keeping a protective hand on her shoulder. The Admiral smiled kindly at Emily. "It's very nice to meet you. Emily, I understand you had quite an exciting visitor last night." Emily nodded, suddenly shy. "There's a recreation area 2 doors down," the Admiral continued. "It has games, books, and a viewing window to see the planet. Would you like to spend some time there while I talk with your father? Officer Chen will stay with you." David tensed at the suggestion of separation, but before he could object, the Admiral added, "The room is monitored, Mr. Orton, and you can check it first. This conversation needs to be classified, but I promise your daughter will be safe." After inspecting the recreation room and making sure Emily was comfortable with the young female officer assigned to watch her, David reluctantly returned to the conference room. "Now," Admiral Kazan said once they were alone, "let's discuss the Ardani." The next hour was a revelation. According to Admiral Kazan, the Ardani were part of a vast interstellar coalition known as the Galactic Concord. This coalition included dozens of spacefaring species, with territories spanning hundreds of light years. Humanity isn't officially aware of the Concord yet, the Admiral explained. "We've had limited contact through specialized channels. The official policy is to keep this information restricted until Earth is deemed ready for full disclosure." "Ready how?" David asked. "Politically unified, technologically advanced enough, culturally prepared for the knowledge that we're far from the most developed species in our neighborhood." The Admiral's expression was grim. "The truth is, we're considered primitive by Concord standards." "So why are they here? Why approach me?" Admiral Kazan activated a holographic display showing a star map. "The Ardani ship you encountered is part of a diplomatic mission. They're collecting information on human colonies, ostensibly as part of an assessment for potential Concord membership." "But you don't believe that," David surmised. "We have reason to be cautious. Several human engineers and scientists who've had contact with the Ardani have subsequently disappeared. When found, they claim to have been on research expeditions. But their stories don't add up." "You think they're being abducted?" "Recruited, perhaps brainwashed. The technology you helped repair, it's not just any propulsion system. It's part of a quantum communication array capable of instantaneous information transfer across any distance. David's engineering mind immediately grasped the implications. That would revolutionize interstellar communication. No more speed-of-light delays. Exactly. And the Ardani are particularly interested in human perspectives on this technology. Our neurological structure apparently gives us unique insights into quantum mechanics that even some advanced species lack. David thought about the repair he'd made. It had seemed straightforward at the time, but now he wondered if he'd unwittingly contributed to something larger. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally. The Admiral leaned forward. "We want you to accept their offer." David stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to go with them? Leave my daughter?" "Emily would be well cared for." "Absolutely not." David cut him off. "I'm not abandoning my child for some interstellar espionage mission." Commander Diaz, who had been silently observing, spoke up. "What if Emily could come with you? The Ardani invited her too, didn't they?" David hesitated. "They mentioned she could accompany me, yes. But why would I put her in that kind of danger?" "Because the alternative might be worse," Admiral Kazan said gravely. "The Ardani don't take rejection well. The last engineer who refused their offer was found dead 3 days later. Official cause: accident. But we have our suspicions." A chill ran down David's spine. "Are you threatening me?" "No. Mr. Orton, I'm warning you. The Ardani are already aware of your abilities. You've become a person of interest to them, and based on past patterns, they won't simply accept your refusal. So my choice is to risk my life and my daughter's by accepting, or risk our lives by refusing. That's not much of a choice." "There's a third option," Commander Diaz interjected. "Accept their offer, but with our support, we can provide you with specialized training, communication equipment, and emergency extraction protocols. You go as our observer. Learn what you can about their technology and intentions, and we ensure your and Emily's safety." David ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. "This is insane. 24 hours ago, I was fixing atmospheric regulators for jam and vegetables. Sometimes history chooses us." "Mr. Orton," the Admiral said quietly, "you have a unique opportunity here, not just to protect yourself and your daughter, but potentially to advance human understanding by decades. And if I still refuse? Then we'll do our best to protect you, but our resources are limited, and the Ardani are persistent." David thought of Emily in the next room, blissfully unaware of the danger they might be in. He thought of Sarah, who had always believed humanity's future lay among the stars. What would she advise him to do? "I need time to think," he said finally. "Of course," the Admiral nodded, "but not too much time. The Ardani gave you 1 planetary rotation to decide, correct? That gives us about 14 hours. David spent the next few hours with Emily in the recreation room, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy as his mind raced through scenarios. The idea of taking his 8-year-old daughter onto an alien vessel terrified him, but so did the prospect of declining and facing unknown consequences. Commander Diaz joined them later, sitting beside David while Emily was engrossed in a virtual reality game about space exploration. "She seems resilient," Diaz commented, watching Emily navigate a simulated asteroid field. "She's had to be," David replied. "Losing her mother hit her hard." A flash of understanding crossed Diaz's face. "The accident 3 years ago. I read about it in your file." "I'm sorry." David nodded but didn't respond. "You were the station's chief engineer," she continued. "Top of your class at the academy. Why give that up to fix farm equipment?" "You know why. It's in your file." His tone was sharper than intended. Diaz was silent for a moment. Sometimes running from the past doesn't help us escape it. Sometimes it just leaves us unprepared when it catches up. David turned to face her. Is that supposed to be profound? You don't know anything about me or what I've been through. You're right, I don't. But I do know that you're an exceptional engineer being offered an unprecedented opportunity, and you're considering refusing because you're afraid. Damn right I'm afraid. I have a child to protect. And you think hiding on a remote colony is protection? Diaz's voice remained calm, but her words cut deep. The universe just found you. Mr. Orton. The question is whether you'll face it on your terms or wait for it to dictate the terms to you. Before David could respond, his attention was drawn to Emily, who had removed the VR headset and was now looking out the viewport at the planet below. Dad, come look. I can see our house from here. David joined her at the viewport, following her pointing finger to the small settlement that was their colony. From this distance, it looked insignificant, a tiny outpost of humanity in a vast, uncaring cosmos. It looks so small, Emily said, echoing his thoughts. It is small, he replied, but it's home. Emily was quiet for a moment, then asked, if we go with the alien, will we see other planets? David looked at her in surprise. You've been listening to more than I thought. She shrugged. The walls are thin, and you and the commander talk loud. David couldn't help but smile. We might see other planets, yes, but it could be dangerous. Mom always said the stars were worth the risk, Emily said softly. That's why she came here, right? To help build the station? The mention of Sarah's words, her belief in humanity's destiny among the stars, struck David deeply. It was true. Sarah had been the idealist, the one who believed in taking chances for a greater purpose. Your mom was very brave, he said finally. She'd want us to be brave, too. Out of the mouths of babes, David thought. Had he been using Emily as an excuse for his own fear? His own reluctance to face the unknown? Later that evening, David met again with Admiral Kazan and Commander Diaz to give them his decision. I'll accept the Ardani offer, he said, on 3 conditions. First, Emily comes with me, and her safety is the absolute priority. Second, I want a direct communication line to Commander Diaz at all times. And third, if I decide things are too dangerous, you extract us immediately. No questions, no delays. The Admiral nodded. Those terms are acceptable. Commander Diaz will be your handler for this mission. She'll oversee your training and remain your point of contact. Training? How much can you teach me in a few hours? More than you might think, Diaz replied. We've developed specialized techniques for rapid information assimilation. By morning, you'll have a working knowledge of known conquered species, basic xenolinguistics, and emergency protocols. The next 12 hours were the most intense of David's life. While Emily slept, he underwent what the IDF called accelerated field preparation, a combination of neural stimulation, immersive simulations, and rapid-fire briefings on everything from conquered political structures to Ardani physiological vulnerabilities. By dawn, his head throbbed with new information, but he felt marginally more prepared for what lay ahead. Commander Diaz provided him with 2 seemingly ordinary wristbands, one for him and one for Emily. These contain quantum-entangled communication nodes, she explained. Undetectable by known Ardani scanning technology. Twist the band 3 times to activate an emergency beacon. Twist and hold for verbal communication. And you're sure they'll work on the Ardani ship? As sure as we can be without having tested them in that exact environment. That wasn't particularly reassuring, but it was better than nothing. After a quick breakfast with Emily, who was excited, despite, or perhaps because of, her limited understanding of their mission, They returned to the surface near David's house. The plan was simple. David would use the signaling device the Ardani had given him, accept their offer, and board with Emily. Commander Diaz and a small team would monitor from a distance. "Remember your training," Diaz said as they prepared to part ways. "Observe everything, but don't appear too curious. The Ardani respect technical competence, but distrust inquisitiveness about their culture or politics." David nodded, trying to project more confidence than he felt. "And if things go sideways? We'll be watching. The moment you activate your beacon, we move." With that less than comforting assurance, David and Emily returned to their house. Once inside, David retrieved the small signaling device from his bedside drawer. "Ready, Spacer?" he asked Emily, who nodded with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "Ready, Dad." David pressed and held the smooth surface of the device as instructed. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then it began to warm in his palm, emitting a soft blue glow. "I think it's working," he said, more to himself than to Emily. Less than 15 minutes later, they heard the now familiar hum of the Ardani vessel. It descended gracefully, landing in the open area beside David's workshop. The same tall, blue-skinned alien emerged and approached them. Its movements were fluid, almost liquid in their grace. "You have reconsidered," the alien stated rather than asked. "Yes," David confirmed. "My daughter and I accept your offer." The alien's gaze shifted to Emily, who stared back with undisguised fascination. "The juvenile accompanies you. This is acceptable." "Before we go," David said, "I'd like to know more about this mission. Where are we going? What will my duties be?" "Such details will be provided once we are underway. Time constraints necessitate immediate departure." David hesitated, alarm bells ringing in his mind. The rushed departure didn't align with what he'd expect from a legitimate scientific or diplomatic mission. "I need some assurance of our safety," he insisted. The alien's skin shifted to a darker hue. "Your safety is guaranteed by Concord protocols. No harm will come to you or your offspring. This is our final exchange before departure. Your decision?" David glanced down at Emily, who looked up at him with complete trust. He thought of Sarah, of her belief in reaching for the stars despite the risks. He thought of Commander Diaz's words about facing the universe on his own terms. "We're ready," he said firmly. The alien gestured toward the ship. "You may bring essential personal items only. All technical requirements will be provided." David and Emily boarded the alien vessel with only 2 small bags containing clothes, a few keepsakes, and, hidden among them, the communication devices from Commander Diaz. The interior of the ship was surprisingly spacious, with smooth, curved walls that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "These will be your quarters," the alien indicated, leading them to a chamber that adapted before their eyes, furniture emerging from the floor and walls reconfiguring to approximate a human living space. "The ship responds to your biological needs," the alien explained. "It will provide sustenance, temperature regulation, and waste processing appropriate for your species." "That's convenient," David managed, trying not to gape at the transforming room. "Rest. Acclimation requires time. We depart orbital space momentarily." With that, the alien left them alone. David immediately began examining their quarters, looking for surveillance devices or potential escape routes. The room seemed to anticipate his needs, revealing storage spaces and controls as he searched. "Dad, look!" Emily called, pointing to a window that had just appeared in one wall. Outside, they could see Proxima Colony growing smaller as the ship ascended. David joined her at the window, watching their home disappear beneath clouds. A mixture of exhilaration and dread filled him. They were actually doing this, boarding an alien ship bound for who knew where, on a mission he still didn't fully understand. He discreetly checked the wristband Diaz had given him, taking comfort in its presence. Whatever happened, they weren't alone. As the ship cleared the atmosphere, David felt a brief sensation of weightlessness, followed by the subtle return of gravity. Artificial, he assumed, like on the station. The view outside the window shifted, stars streaming past at impossible speeds. "Are we going faster than light?" Emily asked, her face pressed against the window. "I think we might be," David answered, equally amazed. Humanity had theorized about FTL travel but had yet to achieve it. The technology would be revolutionary. Hours passed as they settled into their new environment. The room provided food, or something approximating it, and water. Emily, with the adaptability of childhood, quickly turned their strange situation into an adventure, exploring every feature of their quarters. David, meanwhile, struggled with growing unease. The Ardani had yet to return or provide any additional information about their mission. Their quarters, while comfortable, were effectively a cell. The door would not open when he approached it. "Dad?" Emily's voice drew his attention. "Are we prisoners?" Sometimes he forgot how perceptive she was. "I don't think so. Spacer, I think they're just being cautious with us because we're new." "Like quarantine? When Jam's cat had to stay in the special room when they first got her." David smiled. "Something like that, yes." Eventually, exhaustion overcame them both, and they slept on the strange but surprisingly comfortable beds that had formed from the ship's material. David awoke to find the Ardani standing in their quarters, observing them silently. He sat up quickly, heart pounding. "How did you get in?" he demanded. "The barriers respond to my biometric signature." The alien responded calmly. "Your presence is required in the engineering section. The juvenile may remain here or accompany you." David had no intention of letting Emily out of his sight. "She comes with me." The Ardani led them through corridors that seemed to form as they walked, the ship reconfiguring itself around them. Other aliens passed them, some resembling the Ardani, others wildly different in form. None spoke or acknowledged their presence. The engineering section was a vast chamber filled with technology beyond David's comprehension. Despite his accelerated training, crystalline structures pulsed with energy, and holographic displays showed what appeared to be multiple dimensions of space-time simultaneously. "Your task," the Ardani said, indicating a workstation, "is to optimize the quantum synchronization between these nodes." The workstation displayed schematics similar to those David had repaired in his workshop, but far more complex. Even with his enhanced understanding from the IDF training, he struggled to grasp the full implications of what he was seeing. "What exactly does this system do?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "It enables instantaneous information transfer between distant points," the Ardani replied. "Your neurological structure allows you to perceive quantum states that our species cannot. This makes you valuable for this task." David examined the system more closely, recognizing elements of what Admiral Kazan had called a quantum communication array. But something wasn't right. The energy configurations suggested something far more powerful than simple communication. "This looks like it could transfer more than just information," he observed carefully. The Ardani's skin darkened. "Your assessment is accurate. The system has multiple applications." "Such as?" "Such as are not relevant to your assigned task." David decided not to push further for now. Instead, he began working on the synchronization problem, making minor adjustments, while observing as much as possible about the overall system. Emily sat quietly nearby, drawing on a tablet-like device the Ardani had provided. Occasionally, she would look up and watch the aliens with unabashed curiosity. Days passed in this manner. David would work on increasingly complex synchronization problems, all related to the quantum transfer system. He was given more freedom to move around the engineering section, but was still restricted from other areas of the ship. He and Emily remained together at all times, returning to their quarters to eat and sleep. During this time, David learned more about their situation through careful observation and occasional questions. The ship was part of a fleet heading toward what the Ardani called the Convergence Point, a location where representatives from various conquered species would gather for some significant event. One day, while making adjustments to a particularly complex node, David noticed something in the system specifications, a reference to consciousness transfer protocols. The implications chilled him. This wasn't just a communication system. It was designed to transfer living minds across vast distances. That evening, after Emily had fallen asleep, David activated his communication band, twisting it 3 times and holding as Diaz had instructed. "Commander Diaz," he whispered, "can you hear me?" After a moment of static, her voice came through, faint but clear. "Reading you. Orton. Status report." David quickly summarized what he'd discovered about the quantum transfer system and its apparent purpose. "Consciousness transfer?" Diaz sounded alarmed. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without asking directly. The system is designed to map and transmit neural patterns with perfect fidelity. What else could it be for?" "This aligns with some of our intelligence," Diaz admitted. "We've suspected the Ardani might be developing technology to extend their consciousness beyond physical limitations." "But why recruit humans? Why me specifically?" "Your neurological structure, as they said. Humans perceive quantum states differently. Our brains evolved on Earth, with different selective pressures than alien species." "There's something else," David added. "They keep mentioning a convergence that's happening soon, some kind of gathering. We've intercepted communications about this. It appears to be a major Concord event, possibly related to new technology deployment. Your presence there could be invaluable intelligence." "And increasingly dangerous," David pointed out. "If they realize I'm reporting back to you." "Maintain your cover. Continue gathering information. We're tracking your position, but extraction would be challenging at your current location." After ending the communication, David lay awake, troubled by the implications of what he'd learned. If the Ardani were developing technology to transfer consciousness across space, the potential applications were staggering, both beneficial and terrifying. The next day, as David worked, he noticed increased activity among the Ardani. More of them entered the engineering section, examining his work and conversing in their clicking language. "We approached the convergence point," his Ardani supervisor informed him. "Your work has been adequate. Final calibrations are now required." David was led to a new section of the ship, a spherical chamber dominated by a massive crystalline structure. The quantum transfer system he'd been working on was connected to this larger apparatus, which pulsed with energy. "What is this?" he asked, unable to hide his awe. "The Nexus," the Ardani replied. "It will receive the collective consciousness of our species and transmit it across the galactic barrier." "Galactic barrier? You mean to another galaxy?" "Yes. Our physical forms cannot survive the journey, but our consciousness can be preserved and transferred to suitable vessels prepared there." The implication struck David like a physical blow. The Ardani weren't just developing faster communication. They were planning a mass migration of consciousness to another galaxy entirely. "Why?" he asked, forgetting his caution in his shock. "Why leave this galaxy?" The Ardani regarded him silently for a moment. "Our species' long-range observations indicate this galaxy will experience a catastrophic gamma-ray burst within the next 1,000 years. Most advanced life will be extinguished. We seek preservation." "A gamma-ray burst?" David's mind reeled. That's That would be an extinction-level event for humanity. Correct. Your species lacks the technology to escape or shield effectively. But you could warn us, help us prepare. That is not our purpose here. The Concord has protocols about interfering with developing species. Humanity is not yet eligible for such intervention. Anger flared in David. So you'll just let billions die? Use our brains to perfect your escape technology, then leave us to our fate? The Ardani's skin darkened to nearly black. Your emotional response is noted, but irrelevant. The convergence approaches. Your work must be completed. David worked mechanically for the rest of the day, his mind racing. The Ardani, and presumably other advanced Concord species, knew about an impending disaster that would wipe out humanity, yet were doing nothing to help. Instead, they were using human engineers to perfect their own escape. That night, he contacted Commander Diaz again, relaying what he'd learned. A gamma-ray burst? She sounded skeptical. That's their justification? They seemed certain, and if it's true, humanity needs to know. We need to prepare. If it's true, Diaz emphasized, this could be disinformation, Orton, a way to justify their actions or manipulate you. Maybe, but what if it's not? What if they really are abandoning our galaxy because they know something we don't? Focus on your primary mission. Gather as much data as you can on this nexus and the transfer technology. If we can understand it, maybe we can adapt it for our own use. Or stop them from using it, David added quietly. What do you mean? Just thinking aloud. I'll report again tomorrow. David ended the communication and looked over at Emily. Sleeping peacefully. What kind of future awaited her in a galaxy doomed to catastrophe? How could he protect her from a threat of that magnitude? The next day, the ship arrived at the convergence point, a massive space station unlike anything David had ever seen. It appeared to be constructed from the same self-adapting material as the Ardani ship, but on a scale that dwarfed even Earth's largest orbital habitats. David and Emily were allowed to observe from a viewing chamber as the ship docked. The station was teeming with alien vessels of various designs, all converging on this single point in space. Behold the Nexus Prime, the Ardani supervisor announced. The culmination of 5 centuries of Concord cooperation. From here, our consciousness will transcend this galaxy's limitations. David noticed something odd about the station's position. It appeared to be constructed around a natural phenomenon, a swirling distortion in space that reminded him of depictions of black holes, but somehow different. What is that at the center? He asked. A natural quantum fissure, a rare phenomenon that creates a bridge between galaxies. We have stabilized it and adapted it for our purpose. As they docked with the station, David was summoned to a large assembly chamber. Emily was permitted to accompany him, though he kept her close as they entered the vast space filled with representatives from dozens of alien species. At the center of the chamber stood a group of Ardani, who appeared to be leaders, their skin shifting through complex patterns of color. One stepped forward to address the gathering. The Great Migration begins, the leader announced in a version of the clicking language that David somehow understood, perhaps through some translation technology. Our consciousness will transcend physical limitations, preserving our collective knowledge and experience across the galactic void. The assembled aliens responded with various sounds of approval or acknowledgement. David felt increasingly uneasy as he listened to the proceedings. This wasn't just a technological demonstration. It was the beginning of a mass exodus. The human engineer has completed the final calibrations, the leader continued, gesturing toward David. His unique neural structure has solved the synchronization problem that eluded us. All eyes turned to David, who fought the urge to shrink back from the attention. Emily pressed closer to his side, suddenly intimidated by the focus of so many alien beings. The migration sequence will commence in 12 standard time units, the leader declared. All consciousness donors should prepare according to protocol. As the assembly dispersed, David's supervisor approached him. Your work is complete. You have served your purpose. What happens to us now? David asked. Do we return home? That is not possible. The quantum fissure will be destabilized after the migration. This region of space will become hazardous. You're stranding us here? David couldn't keep the alarm from his voice. Your physical forms will not survive. However, we offer you an alternative. The Ardani's skin shifted to a lighter blue. Your consciousness, and that of your offspring, may join the migration. You would continue to exist in new forms, in a galaxy free from the coming catastrophe. David stared in disbelief. You want us to abandon our bodies? Leave humanity behind? It is a logical choice. Your species faces extinction. We offer continuation. And if we refuse? Then you will remain here and face the same fate as your species. The Ardani left them to consider this ultimatum. Once alone with Emily, David activated his communication band, urgently contacting Commander Diaz. They're planning to leave us here, he reported tersely, after they transfer their consciousness through some kind of quantum fissure to another galaxy. Can you abort the process? Diaz asked. Possibly. I've been working on their systems for days. I understand the synchronization protocols better than they realize. But even if I could, we'd still be stranded on this station. Not necessarily. We've been tracking your position. A stealth vessel is already en route. If you can create a distraction or delay their migration, we might be able to extract you. David thought rapidly. I'd need access to the main Nexus controls, and I'd need to make sure Emily is safe. How much time do we have? They said 12 standard time units. Based on their previous usage, that's about 18 Earth hours. Our vessel will reach you in 20. You need to buy us more time. David ended the communication, his mind racing through possibilities. He needed to get to the Nexus controls, but also needed to ensure Emily's safety. And he needed a plan that wouldn't immediately identify him as a saboteur. Emily looked up at him, her eyes wide with understanding beyond her years. They're not going to let us go home, are they? David knelt to her level. Not if they have their way. No, but I'm going to change their plans. How? I'm going to slow down their migration. Commander Diaz is sending help, but we need to give her time to reach us. Emily nodded solemnly. What can I do? David considered this. Emily was small, easily overlooked by the aliens. That could be an advantage. I need you to be my lookout, he told her. Stay close, but if I'm working on something and aliens approach, you give me a signal, like a cough or a sneeze. Can you do that? She nodded, her expression serious. Like spies. Exactly like spies. He smiled, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Now, we need to get to the main Nexus control room. Getting access proved easier than expected. As the engineer who had solved the synchronization problem, David was granted relatively free movement throughout the technical areas of the station. The aliens seemed to consider the human task complete and were focused on their own preparations for the consciousness transfer. David and Emily made their way to the Nexus Control Center, a vast chamber surrounding the quantum fissure. The space was filled with the same crystalline technology he'd been working with, but on a much grander scale. Holographic displays showed countdown sequences and complex quantum calculations. Only a few Ardani technicians were present, monitoring the systems. They acknowledged David with minimal interest as he approached one of the workstations. Final verification of synchronization parameters, he explained confidently. The Ardani merely nodded and returned to their tasks. With Emily standing watch beside him, David began to examine the system controls. The migration process was complex, involving precise quantum alignments that would allow consciousness to transfer through the fissure without degradation. If he could introduce subtle errors into these alignments, the process would fail safety checks and require recalibration, buying precious time. He worked carefully, making changes that would appear as system anomalies rather than deliberate sabotage. Emily coughed softly at one point, alerting him to an approaching Ardani supervisor. David smoothly switched to a diagnostic screen before the alien reached them. "System fluctuations detected," the supervisor noted, looking at David's screen. "Yes, I'm running verification protocols," David replied. "Standard procedure before major operations." The supervisor seemed satisfied and moved on. David continued his work, introducing subtle but critical flaws into the transfer parameters. Hours passed. The station hummed with increasing energy as the migration countdown continued. David managed to introduce enough errors to trigger automatic safety protocols, which would delay the process by at least 10 hours. Hopefully enough time for Diaz's extraction team to arrive. But as the countdown approached what should have been the automatic suspension point, nothing happened. The system continued its preparation sequence without interruption. "Something's wrong," David muttered to Emily. "They should have detected the misalignments by now." "Did they fix what you did?" Emily whispered back. "No, the errors are still there. It's as if..." A chilling realization struck him. They've disabled the safety protocols. They're going to proceed regardless of the risks. This changed everything. If the migration proceeded with the flawed parameters he'd introduced, the results wouldn't just be a delay, they could be catastrophic. The quantum fissure might collapse unpredictably, potentially destroying the station and everyone on it. David faced an impossible choice: reveal his sabotage and face the Ardani's wrath, or allow a potentially deadly transfer to proceed. Neither option guaranteed Emily's safety. As he wrestled with this dilemma, a commotion erupted at the entrance to the control center. Several Ardani security personnel entered, their skin pulsing with agitated patterns. Behind them came his original Ardani contact, who approached David directly. "Human, you have betrayed our trust." The alien's voice was flat, emotionless, despite the accusation. "What are you talking about?" David tried to sound confused, pulling Emily closer to his side. "Your communication with external forces has been detected. Your attempts to disrupt the migration have been identified." David's heart sank. They'd discovered his sabotage and, worse, his communication with Diaz. Any hope of maintaining his cover was gone. "You didn't give me much choice," he said, abandoning the pretense. "You lied about your intentions, used me to develop technology for your escape, and then planned to abandon us here." "Your species' survival was never our concern," the Ardani replied simply. "The Concord's directive is clear. Advanced species must preserve themselves and their knowledge. Less developed species must evolve or perish naturally." "Even if you know they're facing extinction, what kind of advanced civilization does that make you?" The Ardani's skin darkened. "Morality is relative. Human. Our collective consciousness represents billions of years of accumulated knowledge and experience. Its preservation outweighs all other considerations." "Dad," Emily tugged at his sleeve, her voice trembling. "What's going to happen to us?" Before David could answer, the station shuddered violently. Alarms blared, and the holographic displays flickered. "What's happening?" David demanded. The Ardani rushed to check the systems. "The quantum fissure is destabilizing. Your modifications to the synchronization parameters have compromised the containment field." Another, stronger tremor shook the station. The crystalline structures around them began to vibrate at an alarming frequency. "Can you stabilize it?" David asked, his anger giving way to concern. He hadn't intended to cause a catastrophic failure. Stabilization is impossible without recalibration. The migration must be delayed. The Ardani turned to its security personnel. Evacuate all non-essential personnel to the outer habitats. In the midst of the growing chaos, David's communication band activated on its own. Commander Diaz's voice came through, clearer than before. Orton, do you copy? We've engaged the station's defensive systems as a distraction. Our extraction vessel is docking at emergency port 7. Can you reach it? David glanced at a station schematic displayed on a nearby screen. Emergency port 7 was several levels away, but potentially reachable. We'll try, he responded. But the station is becoming unstable. The quantum fissure is collapsing. Then move fast. We can't maintain our position for long. David turned to Emily. We need to go. Spacer. Right now. As they moved toward the exit, the Ardani security personnel blocked their path. The humans remain, their leader ordered. They will assist in stabilization efforts. Like hell we will, David growled. You've used us enough. He looked around desperately for another exit. The control center had multiple access points, but all were guarded. They were trapped. Then, unexpectedly, his original Ardani contact approached. The juvenile should be evacuated, it said to the security leader. Concord protocols prioritize immature organisms during emergencies. The security leader's skin pulsed with what might have been disagreement, but it eventually nodded. The juvenile may proceed to evacuation areas. The adult remains. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. David knelt beside Emily. Listen carefully. Spacer. You need to go with them to the evacuation area. Commander Diaz's people will find you at emergency port 7. Tell them I'm in the Nexus control center. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to leave you. I know, sweetheart, but I need you to be brave, like Mom would want. I'll find you. I promise. He hugged her tightly, then nodded to the Ardani contact. Take her to safety. As Emily was led away, looking back tearfully, David turned to the security leader. Now what? You keep me here until the station tears itself apart? You will assist in stabilizing the quantum fissure. Your neural structure is still valuable. Another violent tremor shook the station, stronger than before. Several of the crystalline structures cracked, releasing bursts of energy. The containment field is failing, one of the technicians reported. Catastrophic collapse imminent. The security leader turned to David. Repair what you have damaged, human, or perish with us. David looked at the failing systems. The sabotage he'd introduced had cascaded beyond his intentions, creating instabilities in the quantum fissure itself. Even if he wanted to fix it now, he wasn't sure he could. But Emily's safety depended on him buying time. If the station collapsed before Diaz's team could extract her, I'll need full access to the synchronization controls, he said. The security leader gestured to a central workstation. David approached it, studying the chaos of fluctuating quantum states displayed before him. The fissure was indeed collapsing, its edges becoming erratic and unstable. He began working, not to fully repair the system, that would take hours they didn't have, but to temporarily stabilize the most critical parameters. If he could slow the collapse, it might give Emily and Diaz's team enough time to escape. Minutes passed as David worked feverishly, redirecting energy flows and recalibrating quantum alignments. The tremors continued, but seemed to decrease in intensity. The fissure, while still unstable, was no longer expanding uncontrollably. Partial stabilization achieved, he announced, but it's temporary. The underlying synchronization errors need to be completely recalibrated. The security leader approached the workstation, studying the displays. Proceed with full recalibration. That will take at least 8 hours, David said, exaggerating slightly. And I'll need access to the original design specifications. As the Ardani conferred among themselves, David discreetly checked his communication band. No signal from Diaz. Had Emily reached the extraction team? Were they already away from the station? Another tremor, milder than before but still concerning, reminded him of their precarious situation. The temporary fixes wouldn't hold indefinitely. The security leader returned. "The evacuation is proceeding. Only essential personnel remain. You will continue stabilization efforts until relieved." David nodded, continuing his work while surreptitiously looking for an opportunity to escape. The number of Ardani in the control center had decreased as the evacuation progressed, but he was still outnumbered and outmatched. His chance came unexpectedly. A massive explosion rocked the station, sending several of the Ardani stumbling. The lights flickered, and emergency systems activated. "External attack," one of the technicians reported. "Multiple human vessels engaging defensive systems." The extraction team, David realized, they were creating a larger distraction. In the confusion, David slipped away from the workstation and toward a maintenance access tunnel he'd noticed earlier. The Ardani, focused on the new threat, didn't immediately notice his absence. The access tunnel was narrow and dimly lit, designed for maintenance drones rather than humanoid occupants. David crawled through it as quickly as he could, following emergency signage toward the outer habitats, and hopefully, emergency port 7. His communication band activated again. "Orton, do you copy? We have the girl. Repeat. We have Emily. She's safe aboard our vessel." Relief washed over David so powerfully he had to stop moving for a moment. "Copy that. Emily is secure. What's your status?" "Maintaining position at emergency port 7. Station defenses are compromised, but we're taking fire from Ardani vessels. We can hold for 10 more minutes, maximum." "Understood. I'm en route." David continued through the maintenance tunnels, eventually emerging into a larger corridor. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow, and evacuation announcements echoed in what he assumed was the Ardani language. He encountered few aliens. Most had already evacuated or were busy with emergency procedures. Those he did see paid little attention to a lone human in the midst of crisis. Following the emergency signage, David made his way toward the outer habitats. The station continued to shudder periodically, but his temporary stabilization measures seemed to be holding. For now. As he approached emergency port 7, he heard the sounds of combat, energy weapons discharging, and the clash of different propulsion systems. Through a viewport, he could see several human vessels engaged with Ardani ships, creating a protective screen around a sleek, black craft docked at the emergency port. Commander Diaz stood at the port entrance, armed and scanning the corridor. When she spotted David, she raised her weapon briefly before recognizing him. "Orton, move it!" she shouted. "We're taking heavy fire!" David sprinted the remaining distance. As he reached Diaz, the station shook violently, nearly throwing him off his feet. "The quantum fissure?" Diaz asked as they hurried into the extraction vessel. "Temporarily stabilized, but it won't last. The whole station could go at any moment." Inside the vessel, David found Emily waiting, tear-streaked but unharmed. She threw herself into his arms. "You came back," she sobbed. "I promised, didn't I?" He held her tightly as the extraction vessel disengaged from the station. Through the viewports, David watched as they pulled away from the massive structure. Other ships, both human and alien, were doing the same, fleeing the increasingly unstable station. "What about the Ardani?" he asked Diaz. "Their consciousness transfer failed. They're still facing extinction from this gamma-ray burst they predicted." "If it even exists," Diaz replied skeptically. "Our astrophysicists have found no evidence of an impending burst. It may have been a manipulation tactic, Or perhaps they detected something we haven't. Either way, they were willing to sacrifice humanity to save themselves. And we've acquired valuable intelligence about their technology in the process. Diaz's expression was grimly satisfied. The quantum communication principles you've helped us understand could advance human technology by decades. As their vessel accelerated away, joining a small fleet of human ships, a blinding flash erupted behind them. The quantum fissure had finally collapsed, taking the Nexus Prime station with it. David held Emily closer, shielding her from the sight. The Ardani migration had failed. But at what cost? How many lives, alien and potentially human, hung in the balance of these interstellar politics? Months later, David stood on the observation deck of Proxima Station, watching as construction crews expanded the facility. The knowledge he'd brought back from the Ardani ship had accelerated human technological development dramatically, particularly in the fields of quantum communication and energy production. Emily was in school on the station now, a real school with other children, not the remote learning she'd endured on the colony. She was thriving, having transformed their adventure into elaborate stories that made her popular among her classmates. Commander Diaz, Serena, as he now called her, joined him at the viewport. The first quantum relay will be operational next month, she informed him. Near instantaneous communication across the entire solar system. And eventually between stars, David added, though not quite the consciousness transfer the Ardani were planning. Speaking of which, our deep space monitoring network detected unusual activity at the coordinates where the Nexus Prime was located. Some of the Ardani may have survived. David had expected to feel anger at this news, but instead found himself hoping it was true. Despite everything, the thought of an entire species facing extinction troubled him deeply. If they did, I hope they learned something from this, he said. About cooperation rather than exploitation. Unlikely, Serena replied pragmatically. But we've learned something, and that's what matters. Humanity knows it's not alone now, for better or worse. David nodded, thinking of Sarah and what she would make of all this. She had believed in humanity's destiny among the stars, in pushing boundaries and taking risks. But she had also believed in doing the right thing, even when it was difficult. The Defense Committee wants to fast-track your appointment as Chief of Quantum Technologies, Serena continued. They're impressed with the adaptations you've made to the Ardani designs. And you? What does Commander Diaz think of my work? She smiled slightly. I think you've come a long way from fixing atmospheric regulators for jam and vegetables. David laughed. I still miss Mrs. Peterson's raspberry preserves. We could visit the colony. The new shuttle makes the trip in under an hour. Maybe next week. Emily has a science presentation on Monday she's been working on for days. As they continued discussing plans, David reflected on how much had changed. He had gone from hiding from the universe to helping humanity prepare for its place in it. The path forward was uncertain. Interstellar politics, the potential threat of the gamma-ray burst, the ethical implications of the technologies they were developing. But for the first time in years, he felt hopeful about the future. Emily would grow up in a world that knew it wasn't alone in the cosmos. A world that was reaching for the stars, not just out of curiosity or ambition, but out of necessity, because the alternative was extinction. Sarah would have approved. As David and Serena left the observation deck, the red dwarf star of Proxima Centauri cast its familiar ruddy glow through the viewport. It reminded him of that day, months ago, when he'd fixed a strange alien's ship, not knowing it would change everything. Sometimes history does choose us, he thought. The question is what we do when it does. In Emily's case, in humanity's case, he was determined the answer would be, we rise to the occasion. We face the universe on our own terms. we survive. And perhaps someday, we thrive among the stars.